you're starting out or you're building a business that's already existing and you want to go into new grounds, is to seek God and to seek the direction of the Holy Spirit. And so I can tell you, I can't count how many times I prayed and fasted to hear the voice of God for myself. You know, nowadays you see people rushing to go into churches where there are prophets. Prophets can prophesy for them and tell them the direction. People pay a lot of money to prophets, so-called prophets, to pray for them and to give them direction. And one of the things that I learned from my parents is God speaks to everybody.
Carolyne, welcome to the Follow Forward podcast, where we highlight real stories, global voices, and Christ-centered leadership. I'm your host, Tim Tucker, coming to you from Cape Town in South Africa. And Carolyne, you're in sunny Manchester right now, aren't you?
It's not sunny, unfortunately. It's been raining.
Well, I'm sure
heavily.
Is it raining? We're going to get into how you sacrificed
some sunshine, please.
You sacrificed the sunshine of Africa for the rather duller weather in Manchester. We'd love to hear more about that. But just to get into things in this episode, Carolyne, you and I share a same city. I was living in Cape Town, but you got to know my wife, Christina. But tell me, what brought you to Cape Town at that time, those years ago?
I moved to Cape Town in 2008, having worked in the nonprofit sector in Kenya in my early 20s. And I decided I needed international experience. So I grew up in a family, a Christian and a loving family. And my parents really impacted my life in a way that made me think differently about how to make an impact in people's lives. My dad was in the medical field, a doctor. My mom served in church and had businesses. And so our home was a home that hosted so many people, ranging from people who were homeless to people who didn't have a place to stay, to young girls who were pregnant and had been kicked away from their homes by their parents and had nowhere to go. And my mom would open doors for them, to children who are looking for scholarship, and my parents would either pay school fees for them or would look for scholarship through the Anglican Church of Kenya, ACK, which is Church of England here in the UK. And so having grown up in that community or that family, I would say community, because at some point in my life, I really did not know who my brothers or sisters were per se, because we just looked like we are all this big family. And I remember one time in primary school, we were asked, can you draw a picture? You know, the way they say, oh, draw a picture of your family. And my exercise book, which had, you know, like your, a little bit bigger than A5, like 2 A5s, got so full. And my primary school teacher told me, those are not your brothers and sisters, they are relatives. And some of them, you're not even related to them because they knew me. I said, no, but they live with us. They are our family. And I was crying. And I was like, no, they are my family. We live with them. She's my big sister. And this is my uncle. And it was so funny because I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. And I saw family as people who are near you, live around you. Sometimes they come around. And so having grown up in that setting, I went to the University of Nairobi. I studied mathematics and chemistry. I really wanted to be a chemical engineer. And so in my last year at the university, I volunteered to be a peer educator for behavior change communications program. And I did not know that at that time that was going to turn into a job. And after a few months of going through training, there was an opportunity for me to be to take on a volunteer role after I graduated. And I really thought it was a volunteer role. I was already working in a company, a research company. And I had two options: either become a chemical engineer or get into statistics and become a statistician. And I was already on the path of studying statistics, but I was still actively applying to do my postgraduate on chemical engineering. And it was at that point that I got an opportunity to work with this organization. Now, an organization, it wasn't just a club at the university. It had been registered and got funding from what we now call FCDO, which is the Foreign International Aid body here in the UK. Back then, they were calling it DFID, Department for International Development, and they got funding. And so I got my first job to work in the charity sector or NGO sector. And after working for them for a few years, 3 years, I was thinking, now that I'm in this field, let me look for international opportunities. And so an opportunity opened for me to move to South Africa through another British company called Voluntary Services Overseas, VSO, which is the oldest voluntary organization. They hire professionals who have at a minimum 2 years experience, and they place them in organizations around the world to do work. And that's how I landed in Cape Town.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Incredible. So, I mean, there are a few things when I listen to your story that really strike me. The threads. I think when we listen to one of those stories, we can sense the threads of grace in those stories that help shape us. I think for many of us, the direction of our lives is not just a flash of lightning in the sky and God puts it in neon lights and suddenly we know what we're to do with our lives. Often it's the weaving together. And this is important for me for the Follow Forward podcast. People listening to this, they understand that God weaves things together to shape our history. And in doing that, as we set our eyes on Him, we follow Him into the future that He has for us. And sometimes we only make sense of all those strands once we're the other side of that. So the fact that you had this strong sense of community and family growing up, it then becomes no surprise to me that now this side of your journey, you're involved in community development, in impacting people and empowering people along the way. And so fascinating to see those threads. And it almost sounds like what you were on a career path in one direction, and then something suddenly happened that introduced you to the NGO space and the voluntary workspace, that suddenly you're able to bring together strands of your past into now not only your future, but actually your vocation and your sense of calling as well. So you ended up in Cape Town in 2008, but now you are leading, you're the founder and CEO of the NGO Whisperer. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the steps that took you on that journey, because now you're working within the international NGO space. This, even though it's the NGO space, there's still an element of comfort in that. Whereas at some point you took this leap of faith to start your own organization, and that again led you to move countries once again. Share some of that story with us, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's a really good question, Dr. Tim. The story is very long, but I will try and shorten it. So, having worked with Voluntary Services Overseas, VSO, I worked in Cape Town. I was first placed in Cape Town. I worked there in 1 year. I moved to Pretoria. I worked in Pretoria for a few months and then moved to Johannesburg, where I was placed with an organization called International Network of Religious Leaders Living with HIV, in short, INERELA. INERELA is a global network of religious leaders who are living with or affected by HIV and AIDS. And every religious leader is affected by HIV and AIDS in Africa and around the world, because they have congregations and members in their congregations who are facing it. And so at the moment when I was there, my job was to help them raise funds. And I did. I did raise funds from a number of funders, including Ford Foundation, AMFA, and many others, including the South African government and other large multilateral bodies. And the programs that this network was doing was mainly to fight stigma and discrimination against people living with HIV in our communities. And at that point, they had a program that they had curated that was being rolled out across all the 22 countries they were operating in Africa, and then also rolling it out in Asia. And they had an office in India for INERELA umbrella Asia Pacific, and they also had an office here in the UK and in the United States and in Latin America. So my role was to raise funds for these organizations and the regional bodies that were running these networks. And at the end of the day, I was working with religious leaders across all faiths. So we are talking about Christians, Baha'i, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhism, all religions were under this umbrella body, and it still exists today. So I did a couple of amazing things there, from launching a magazine called Faith in Action. Positive Faith in Action was the magazine which was being distributed around the world with the World Council of Churches and so on and so forth. I believe a copy of it was also being sent to the Vatican, to the Pope, and I was part of a team that put together a book about what's faith got to do with it. It's basically all religious leaders writing a book about their experiences in fighting stigma against HIV and AIDS in their congregation. And we had the late emeritus Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, actually writing the foreword, which was really cool meeting him. He was an hilarious leader and would just make people so comfortable in their presence. And so after that, with VSO, what happened is you can work with them for a maximum of 3 years, because you cannot be a volunteer forever. We were getting a stipend, but it's of course not enough for you to build a successful life. So after my third year with VSO in Johannesburg with Inarella, my term came to an end, and I thought I would really loved Cape Town. So I started applying for jobs, and I worked with another amazing organization in South Africa that was focused on prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV in Cape Town. And from there, I thought to myself, I'm learning a lot of things, and I also come across smaller organizations, grassroots organizations that are making an impact, but do not have the capacity to have someone like me hired. And so I thought, I want to start a consulting business that is supporting these organizations. And that's where the NGO Whisperer Center for Social Impact came about. And I officially started working as an independent consultant in 2018 when I stepped out of my employment. I was then based in Cape Town. I had met my now husband, then our fiance, and we thought, move to Cape Town, move to Manchester. There are lots of opportunities for you. He was already working here, and so I moved here, and the NGO Whisperer Center for Social Impact was registered and is now operating as a business, working in the charity sector and supporting organizations around the world.
Wow, fantastic. And so from a faith perspective, from your following Jesus, um, what were the confirmations to make such a big decision like that? How did you sense God speaking to you throughout that process?
Every one of my decisions have really been rooted in prayer. Um, sometimes people say, "Oh, I pray about everything," but I really prayed about this because it was every step on the way. Even moving to South Africa, I left a well-paying job in Kenya, and I probably would have been an MD of some company in Kenya, and left it to do volunteering work. You don't do that if you don't have faith. You don't do that if you don't think about, oh, God is my source and he's going to provide for me. And one of the things that really, really drove me to do these things is I have this thing at the back of my mind that my steps are ordered by God. And so because my steps are ordered by God, my decisions that I make are inspired by the Holy Spirit. And I believe that the Holy Spirit was sending me into these places because if I had it my way, I would probably be a chemical engineer, having studied some chemical engineering degree and gone further into advancing and maybe managing or coming up with some industry or setting up an industry in Africa, because that Africa has always been at the back of my mind. So I never thought in my career growing up, especially when I was in high school, choosing the subjects that I wanted to do, that I would end up in the charity sector or NGO sector or social impact, as many people would call it. But I believe that God ordered my steps and led me here because He wanted to do things in my life to change me, first and foremost, to mold me into the leader that I am today, and to make my impact magnified in ways that I probably wouldn't have if I chose the direction that I wanted. I had a lot of conversations with my father when he was alive. When I told him, I got actually the last conversation I had with my dad before he passed away was I told him I have gotten a job in the nonprofit sector. He knew that I wanted to be a chemical engineer, I had told him about it. And I remember when he called me, it was literally the last conversation I had with him. And then the next one was basically me getting a phone call to say my dad has passed away. And I was going through training for my job, the first job that I had with I Choose Life in Kenya. And I remember my dad asking me this question: do you find job satisfaction in this new job? And are they paying you a salary? Can you take care of yourself and pay your bills? Because it's important to be independent. That was a thing with my dad. He always said, do whatever you do, but make sure that whatever you're doing, as much as you're making an impact in the community, make sure you can take care of yourself and not be dependent on other people. And I said, yes. And I told him how much I was earning. He said, yeah, for a young woman like you, that will be enough for you to save and to build a good future for yourself. And little did I know that that was actually going to be the last conversation I had with him. And then he reminded me to always put God first. My dad had this thing in all his books. Anything that he bought, he always wrote an inscription that says, put Jesus first. So if you went to my home in the library, in our home now, all the books that my dad had, even if he gave you anything, he would, you know the way people sign autographs and they use their signatures, my dad would write, put Jesus first. So everything in our home had put Jesus first. If you ask my dad, Daddy, please sign this for me, he would sign and say, put Jesus first. So I knew putting Jesus first in everything that I did would guide my steps, would help me to succeed, no matter which route or career choice I made. And he reminded me to pray, pray, pray. Pray 3 times. He always said that. Pray, pray, pray. Put Jesus first. So that got into my mind. Everything, every decision that I made, I prayed. Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I have. But even in my mistakes, and because I'm human, I have learned to remember to put Jesus first. So that has been with us as a family, myself. And even as I chose the career and things that I have done, at the back of my head, I always hear my dad say, put Jesus first and pray, pray, pray.
Amazing. Amazing. And part of this podcast is who were the inspirations that we are seeking to follow as leaders. And hearing that about your dad is really special and wonderful to hear, and how that stayed with you, and how that conversation you had with him was almost God underlining his confirmation, of this plan and the direction that you've been on. And obviously starting an organization like the NGO Whisperer has its challenges. And when you mention, 2018, 2019, I think all of us immediately realize starting something right before COVID must have been a nightmare. So you're moving country, you're married, you're moving country, you're going to Manchester, drizzly Manchester, and you're starting the NGO Whisperer all at the same time. From all those lessons, from all those experiences, what lessons would you think you would want to pass on to emerging leaders who are seeking to follow God's call on their lives?
One of the most important things you can do for yourself, whether you're starting out or you're building a business that's already existing and you want to go into new grounds, is to seek God and to seek the direction of the Holy Spirit. And so I can tell you, I can't count how many times I prayed and fasted to hear the voice of God for myself. You know, nowadays you see people rushing to go into churches where there are prophets, so prophets can prophesy for them and tell them the direction. You know, people pay a lot of money to prophets, so-called prophets, to pray for them and to give them direction. And one of the things that I learned from my parents is God speaks to everybody. And I remember reading Bible stories and the way God was speaking with Moses. And I remember we had this book. It was full of stories. And there was one called the 10 Commandments. And it was the story of how God became a friend of Moses. And there it said, and I remember my parents used to read to us at night before we went to bed. I think I couldn't read, but I would look at pictures. And I remember this night when my dad told us, you know, God would speak to other people in parables and in visions and dreams, but with Moses, he spoke to him face to face. And I remember telling my dad, do you think God can still speak to us face to face? And he said, if you seek him, he will. And that
Amazing.
stuck with me. And I was like, I want to be like Moses. I want to see God's face. And I would ask my dad, does God look like you? And he would say, I don't know how God looks like because I haven't seen his face. And then I said, I want to go to heaven and ask Moses, how does God look like? You know, as a little child. So I had this thing of, if you seek me, what the Bible says, if you seek me, you will find me. And I was like, wow. If you knock, the door will be opened. And I was like, wow, this is so powerful. God really is like dad, you know? And so I got to know God from that perspective. And my dad would always say, no, I'm not like God. God is bigger than all of us. So I would imagine God was like this huge person. And he speaks to people and he's loving and he's personal because he can be your friend and he can talk to you. And so I learned the secret of prayer and fasting when I think I was 8 years old. And then I would fast and say, God, speak to me, tell me. And God would speak to me in dreams. I would dream something and then I wake up in the morning, I remember it, and I would tell my parents. And they would say, God is telling you to do this. God is telling you to do that. And I remember so many dreams where God was directing me and telling me to do this and to do that and to be nice. You know, as a little child, it's little things like God telling you to be kind and nice to that bully in school and forgive them and be nice to them, things like that. And so I encourage anyone who is seeking to step into new territories, seek God for yourself. We can give you wisdom, words of wisdom, because we are coaches and mentors and we've done it. But God knows the path that he has for you. God truly knows what's in store for you. So as much as it is excellent and it is advisable and recommended to have a coach, but also seek God to give you direction on which coach you should have. And I did that. And I have some amazing coaches who have spoken to my life, guided me, but at the same time, I seek God for myself to this very day. I mean, last week, we had our global fellowship, global summit, not fellowship program, global summit. And we had people coming from all over the world. And I prayed and I said, God, fill the room with people who you want to come and listen to whatever it is that will be shared. And yes, I had people who came. I had people who said they would come, but they didn't for one reason or another. And sometimes it kind of makes you feel afraid that you're starting out this thing in a country and in a city where not so many people know you. I could easily take this summit to Kenya and I would have I don't know, 2,000 people in the room, or in South Africa where people knew me. But God saw it fit for me to have the first ever in-person event here in Manchester. And I prayed and I told God, fill the room. And God filled the room with people. Bring guests of honors. We had the Honorable Minister from Eswatini traveling all the way with the delegation coming here. How did that happen? God did it. God did it. I don't have any secret sauce to it. The secret sauce is Jesus Christ. The secret sauce is God. So if you're looking to building anything, whether you have the finances for it or not, I didn't have the finances for it. God provided it. And I can tell many stories of how God spoke to me. Another thing that I would like to mention is the NGO Whisperer service delivery model was based on what God led me. And you can say, oh, but how does God lead you? Sometimes I'm sleeping and God gives me an idea to do something. I write it down and I implement it the next day. That's how God works. God will give you an idea. It could be an idea from Dr. Tim or Lucy, or somebody would say, Caroline, you should do this. That's God speaking. The problem with us is we're waiting for a big, loud voice. Oh, Caroline, do this. No, God speaks in subtle ways. It could be a need. It could be an irritation. It could be something that bothers you and you want to do it. And so each and everything that I have done, God spoke to me through people. Sometimes it was through a dream, or sometimes it was an idea. I was sitting and this idea, which I would have never come up with, just pops up. The secret is to implement it immediately, because if you don't, God will look for another vessel to do it. And then you will say, oh, they stole my idea. No, they didn't. You took your sweet time to implement it. So as God speaks, and God moves very fast. That's one thing I have learned. God moves very fast. He tells you something today. If you don't implement it, next week you'll see someone posting it on social media. Oh, I have a great idea. I'm starting this. And you're like, that's my idea. How did I know? God gave it to you. You did not do anything to it. He's moving so fast because he has all the resources and everybody that is supposed to help you to move forward. So one of the things that I have learned, I think of something, I implement it. If it fails, I tell God, you know what? I tried it. It didn't work. So maybe it was not you, but I tried it. Nobody will say, oh, God spoke to you and you didn't do it. So I'm like, God, there's this idea. I have checked it with a few other people, and sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I just implement it because I know that's a God idea, because I couldn't have come up with that idea myself. The NGO Whisperer, even the name, the way it came to me, we were at a training. I wanted to start a consulting business. I was thinking of calling it something very different. I actually had a name. It was called Carolyne Opinde Consulting. I even have a
Right.
logo to this very day. But when I was seated there, one of the coaches, she's a born-again Christian. She's called Coach Sherry, based in South Africa. We were in London at a hotel near the airport, and she pointed at me and told me, what is it that you want to do? Thankfully, someone recorded it, because words just came out of me in tears. And I said this. I said, I am the NGO Whisperer. I help nonprofits to raise funds so they can successfully impact people's lives. Thankfully, someone recorded it, because just like that, tears streamed down my face and I couldn't remember what I said. And she said, do you remember what you said? I said, I don't remember what I said. You spoke so powerfully, she told me. Did someone record it? Because it was a moment, it was a God moment, and someone was recording it and they played it back to me. And that became our first tagline. We help nonprofits raise funds so they can successfully impact people's lives. That is God.
Amazing. Wow, Caroline. But in listening to you, I was reminded of the founders of YWAM, one of the biggest global mission organizations in the world. They wrote a small book that had a big impact on me. It's Lauren Cunningham. I can't remember his wife's name. I've been trying to think of it, but they have like 12 principles from hearing God's direction. And it seems like many young people, many young leaders, this is the thing they struggle most with: is how do we know that God is speaking? How do we know the direction we should go in? How do we know this is from Him? And yes, as you said, people seek confirmation or voices from all over the place. But the thing they said is, if it's so important, God will speak to you directly. And they often had people come to them and say, you should do this or you should do that. And I have that all the time. You sit at a coffee meeting with someone and they hear your vision in your heart, and the first thing they say to you is, you know what you should do. And exactly like you said, the filter then is, but if it's so important, then God will surely tell me that as well. There will be a confirmation in my spirit, or God will speak directly to me. And we need to have that confidence, don't we, in the Word, in Him, in our relationship with Him, that these things are birthed in prayer, it's birthed in our disciplines, it's birthed in our relationship with Him. But secondly, it's birthed in obedience, which is the other thing you said. Obedience in the direction that God has called us in, making those steps of faith. That is so critically important for us, isn't it? And follow forward is exactly about that. It's about saying, we're following in the paths of those who've trod a steady, straight path of obedience. And those are the people that we should be following, those who are hearing from God as they themselves follow Christ. So thanks so much for sharing that, Caroline. Really encouraging. I've got. I want to land this with a specific question, because you said you always keep Africa in the back of your mind. You said that. Well, I want to bring Africa to the front of your mind right now. As someone who has a heart and spends so much time investing in NGOs that are based here in Africa, what do you sense God is doing in these days in the NGO space, in the social development space, and in the Christian mission space in terms of Africa in particular? What is the Lord saying and speaking to us? And how could you encourage emerging leaders here in this beautiful continent?
Thank you so much, Dr. Tim. Actually, Africa is not at the back of my mind. It's always at the front, because we
I was
have
just quoting
so
you. I
many
was just quoting you.
so many leaders in Africa. Everything that we do, the first leaders that we have signing up, whether it's for our Global Fellowship Program, the summit, and all that, all come from Africa. Why Africa? Africa, first and foremost, I'm African. I sound African, I'm African. Number two is, I believe Africa has a very special place in the heart of God, because the kind of faith that we have in Africa, it is that childlike faith where we believe. We believe in God. We believe despite all those things, we believe in God. It could be because of our traditions, it could be because of our culture, but there's a deep rooted desire to serve God in Africa. And so for any young person in Africa who is at a point where they're wondering what to do with their lives or where to go and so on and so forth, my encouragement to you is, and I believe this strongly, yes, I live here in the UK, but one of the most important thing is to believe in who you are. Believe in who you are as a person, as a leader. You have been called. You have been called at such a time as this to impact your community. Whether you are a leader in the marketplace, whether you have been called to serve God in an office as a pastor, evangelist, prophet, teacher, whatever it is, or even in administration, because for some people, that is their calling, to help, to organize, to do things. I would love for you to do everything that you do in excellence. When you are excellent in your ways, opportunities open. People follow you because of excellence. It doesn't matter how small what you do is, or in the most rural area where you are. If you are excellent, doors will open, because the world is so full of fakeness and mediocrity, and people are thirsty and hungry for anything that is excellent and real. So focus on building whatever it is that you're building. If you're running a church, if you're starting a church, if you're an evangelist, be excellent in all your ways. Today, just before this, we had a masterclass. We run masterclasses every Friday as part of our Global Fellowship program. And the topic is client service excellence. And who is a client? A client is anyone who you serve in one way or another, or anyone who needs anything from you. So if a client is someone you serve, we are in the business of serving people. And in the process of serving people, there's one thing we learned today from our coach, and I'm going to share it here with you, is there are moments of truth. Moments of truth are instances where someone has an encounter with you and they have a moment of truth on who Carolyne is and what Carolyne is offering. It could be a positive or a negative moment of truth. And they will go ahead and tell people about it. Basically, it's the testimony that they have in encountering you the first time. And the more positive moments of truth people have of you, the more positive they will speak of you. And sometimes, even if there has been lots of positive moments of truth, if a negative moment of truth pops, then someone changes so quickly, because it's so easy for us to spread negative messages than positives. So to all our young people in Africa, to anyone who is in the process of making a decision on what to do, two things: be excellent in all your ways and ensure that in your service that you create positive moments of truth. Why are these two important? Anyone who's interested in financing your work, whether it's a business as an investor or someone giving donations because you're spreading the gospel, like the message Ethiopia, let's give people a wow experience so that when they test and see what we do, they will say, wow, these evangelists are excellent in their ways. These young people are excellent in their ways, because that's the only way we can open up our small businesses, small churches, and create them to be bigger. If we are reaching out to people who do not know Jesus, the first moment they meet us, can they experience the true meaning of being a follower of Christ is? Can we have this mind which was in Christ Jesus in us, so that when people meet us, that love and warmth that Jesus shown to the prostitute, that love and warmth that Jesus gave to Zacchaeus when he told Zacchaeus, come down from the tree today, I'll be a guest at your house. Can we show that to people who don't know Jesus? Because if Jesus was alive today, trust me, he will not be in churches. He will be in corners where there are prostitutes and all sorts of people. He will be in those corners calling them, come to me, come to me. And that's what we have been called to do. Be excellent and ensure that moments of truth when people encounter you are positive.
Fantastic. Wow. That's amazing, Carolyne. I think so relevant within our context of the message in Africa. We really want to raise the bar in terms of missions, in terms of working with young people, and to set that kind of example, because one organization, be that the NGO Whisperer and everything you do, Message Trust, we can't fulfill the task on our own. But what we can do is blaze a trail and set examples for others to follow in the things that they're doing. And so I see that in you. I've over the last 5 years now that we've had interaction, and you've been on my advisory board, and I see that in you. And you know, congratulations for everything you've been doing within the NGO Whisperer. We appreciate. I know one of our South African staff has been doing the fellowship with you. You interact with us regularly. You've been a great counsel and advisor to me as well. I have one final question. And, you know, you've now moved, you've been in the UK for 6-7 years. And we know the African diaspora plays an important role globally. And God is using the African diaspora incredibly in so many ways. But what do you feel is the responsibility, or maybe shall I use the word opportunity, for the African diaspora in terms of their support and involvement and engagement, particularly in youth development and community transformation, back to Africa itself? And how do you see that maybe moving forward in the next few years?
That's a great question. I believe that as people who are living here as the diaspora, there are two versions of the diaspora. There are those who say, I have left and I don't want to invest in Africa because of whatever reasons they have. And there are those who say, as much as I am here, my heart is in Africa. Someone once told me, when you cut me open, my heart is beeping Africa, 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 Africa. And so I'll speak about those whose hearts are beeping Africa, Africa, Africa. There are so many ways that we can support, apart from supporting our immediate family members, which is what almost everyone is doing, going above and beyond and finding organizations such as the Message Trust that's doing amazing work and impacting communities, and supporting these organizations financially and supporting them with prayers. And for those who have technical expertise, giving your time to these organizations such as the Message Trust is something that will turn around communities, because now you're not just focusing on your brothers and sisters, cousins and uncles and aunties. You're touching an organization that's reaching hundreds and thousands of young people and impacting their lives. And that 1 hour per month or 2 hours or whatever time you're giving in mentoring young people or young leaders would be turned around into 100-fold, 1,000-fold, and it would magnify. It's like a ripple effect. So giving your time in kind by volunteering time into building something that someone is building. I would say give your technical expertise to the Message Trust, for example, because you need it. Secondly is finding a way of giving regularly. I know giving once off is amazing, but that's once off. As someone who teaches people on fundraising, the most impactful donations are the ones that are given over time. So consider allocating whatever resources that you earn per month and doing a debit order or something through the Message Trust UK or any other offices in the countries where you are, closer to the country where you are, so it can go to Africa. But doing it long term, commit to 12 months. Commit to, at a minimum, 12 months. Once-off donations are great, but what we need is consistency over time. So giving monthly over 12 months, and then you'll get reports from Dr. Team. I get a newsletter. I get resources from them that they send to me. Number 3 is by praying for Africa, for the leaders in Africa, and having that time that you dedicate to pray, whether it's one country or regions, or whenever there's something happening in Africa, elections and stuff like that might destabilize the country or the economy. Do that. And if there are organizations that you want to put on your prayer every day and names of leaders, you can start with Dr. Tim and the Message Africa. Pray for them, because prayer changes things. When we collectively pray, we are opening windows of heaven, we are giving, we are doing all these amazing things. And I believe God hears our prayers. And so those are 3 ways in which I can ask anyone in the diaspora whose heart is for Africa to do so. And for those who have been burnt by for one reason or another, you have given and your money didn't go into the right soil, I would say test the Message Trust and see. And hold them accountable. Dr. Tim is so accountable. He will send you lots of emails to update you on what's happening. For those who feel, no, I've given, I don't want anything to do with Africa, I would ask you to reconsider your thoughts and trust and consider the Message Trust, even if it's for 6 months. And then ask them, what did my money do? I want to know. They will show you exactly. They're so accountable. They will tell you exactly what has been happening. They will give you numbers. They will tell you all these things you need to know about where your money has gone to, including names of people who are leading those countries. So for all of us in the diaspora, consider giving back to Africa. Consider organizations such as the Message Trust that are impacting lives, that are not just preaching the gospel, but changing communities and transforming communities through the gospel.
Amazing. Thank you, Caroline. And I think what I see in you as well is someone who's an advocate for Africa, where you are continuing to influence, continuing to support, continuing to share the good news stories that are coming out of the continent as well. And isn't it interesting in God's economy how here's me from Manchester in the southern part of Africa leading a Christian mission here, and you're there in Manchester doing the work you're doing that's having global impact. It's really remarkable to see how God does these things. Caroline, thank you so much for sharing your story and insights with us. I think your journey has been an inspiration to us, and we cheer you on and look forward to continuing our partnership in the future as well. This has been the Follow Forward podcast. It's real stories, global voices, Christ-centered leadership. Thank you so much, Caroline, for joining us, and we'll see everyone next time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Follow Forward podcast. This may have been my idea, but I worked with an awesome team to make it come to life. Thank you to Lucy for guest management, scheduling, and being a real gap filler. Jordan for taking over the guest management baton, as well as doing content production, scripting assistance, and editing of these podcasts. Alistair and my lovely wife, Christina, for technical production, and Taryn for taking behind-the-scenes content and crew support. Whether you're watching or listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you are on, and share this episode with your friends so we can inspire even more people together. We release a new episode every Thursday, along with extra content to help you grow as a leader of people and a follower of Christ. Follow my Facebook page at Dr. Tim Tucker to access all the bonus content. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to send a DM or leave a comment letting us know what you enjoyed about the episode. God bless, and we'll see you next week.